Welcome back, everybody, to Inventing Construction. My name is Ross Griffin, and today we're going to talk about something very interesting. Focus on cost management. No, forget cost management. I should get that right, shouldn't I? Forget cost management, focus on data management.
That can be definitely
forget cost management, forget everything I just said. No, forget cost management, focus on data management. And we're going to discuss what this statement really means. How do we go about it? Structures and standards over tradition. And what is the value? And with me today is Sean John, aka the Kerry Man. Sean, you're getting used to this now, man. So you can introduce yourself there again. I know you love talking about yourself.
It's a very valid HR claim.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
this video evidence.
Yeah,
I've been working in construction for about 20 years. About 12 years of that has been as a professional quantity surveyor. Done a lot of estimating, cost planning, tender negotiations, contract preparation work, schedule amendments, as well as contract administration, and then post-contract duties. Working for a variety of clients. I've worked in a number of different sectors. Did that in a couple of different countries around the world. So it was a good experience, at which time I then moved to a developer for the last eight or so years. And again, huge experience working client side, fantastic team working with, delighted to be honest, be part of it. Deliver some excellent projects, which hugely proud of. But again, surrounded kind of in the collaboration of building them together. I suppose about 15 years ago, I kind of realized there's a lot of disputes in construction, unnecessary, and it really came down to trying to help people understand why that was happening. So I specialized in contract management, and I've done a lot of dispute work. I do a lot of claims and data management. So I have a wealth of knowledge in that sector as well.
Quite rounded there and all that experience. And at the moment, you're chilling out in Copenhagen in the lovely 25-degree heat, sunshine, and get a couple of Carlsbergs later on maybe. We'll see how the day goes. We'll see how this podcast goes for starters. Maybe you don't deserve it afterwards. We'll see. We could fall out. But so forget cost management. Focus on data management. Talk to me. What does that mean?
When I started, I suppose, as a quantity surveyor, commercial manager a number of years ago, the focus really was on, I suppose it still is, but to a lesser extent, we were trying to drive value through cost, which is a good philosophy. But over the last number of years, what I've really seen is what clients are looking for is ultimately the product that we're building, the components, the building, the facility, that needs to last the life expectancy of those components.
As a minimum, at least.
As a minimum. So you're really looking at whole life costs. And for me as a client, that was fundamental to our approach to even going out to the market. So going into, we're talking not so much about cost anymore. You're talking about the components, whether it's the supply chain. What's this thing going to be made of? What warranties am I getting? What guarantee periods am I getting? You're looking at how long can I make this asset class last? And when does the life cycle costing kick in to start paying back for that? And will the companies be there to support that endeavor after construction finishes? Which is fundamental. So data management for me is everything we do from the very inception to the point where we say to our client, we shake their hand, we finished out the defects, everyone's happy, no disputes. You're in a place where then you move into using that data, captured in a way, rather than it going into boxes and filed, which is useless. You're in a place where we are now, as an industry, some people are using that to the betterment of their asset class. And that's saving them money and the net to gross that they're driving at. So it's saving them money because they're able to rely on their warranties. They're able to rely on their guarantees. And it's not that you're looking for someone to come and do something for free, but if you've installed a window in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations and you've installed it with an approved installer, why as a client should you have to pay for another window if it fails when it's properly maintained, and I add that, properly maintained during the life, if it's supposed to last you 20 years?
Within the parameters of the life cycle that
nobody wants anything
specified.
more, but in the parameters that was there.
So are you saying then as QSs and cost managers, we're now moving into data managers in a much more in-depth way, and are we taking on that role for clients right now in setting up assisting in setting up the project in terms of data structure, so that design information, all of that is collated under the parameters of whatever the BIM execution plan, the ICT agreements, etc.
I think we should use our time more wisely now, because we are going to spend less time doing takeoff. We're going to spend less time doing the more rudimentary side of quantity surveying. But what we should do then is add value to our clients by spending more time upskilling, interfacing with the supply chain, becoming more aware of the tech that's out there, the tried and tested things that actually find out where your client is currently losing money, whether in the operation or in the asset class they're looking at. Find out the things that from their operations team, what's not working. At which point, reverse that back into the design we're looking at with the team, or make the team aware of it. So therefore, spend a bit of time and effort with your client, like real research and development into improving a component which has failed 500 times for them. And it might be they might have 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 or 100,000 units on their books, depending if it's resi or anything else like that. But you want to be in a place where driving that value back in, it ultimately benefits the client in the long run. And that's a very small component of data management, because as we start to, as QSs, as quantity surveyors, if we spend that time understanding the supply chain, understanding the players, understanding the different parameters that these other supply chain members work to, we can then at a much earlier stage get them interfaced with our project, at which point it'll only benefit the client.
And we become more informed in order to advise even earlier in the process, before we engage with the supply chain, and even just to give the advice that we should engage with the supply chain because of this value creation, right?
Some clients may have the view that involving the supply chain too early is a negative thing. No, keep them at arm's length. That's not, in my experience. There's an appropriate time to get people involved for expertise. That's crucial. I would have said that expertise will only add value. It might be that you realize that one particular type of component will never fit with the other parameters, at which point you have to move away. That in itself is a value.
Yeah, and the earlier that happens, the less impact it has on the project, less redesign, less cost, less time, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's a moving feast, really, the constant evolution of that design. But I would have said, it's not that you're telling that supply chain member in one form or another. It's not that you're saying to them that they're getting the project. What you're doing is, and again, I'd urge design team members to build the parameters around that. I really would urge them to say, find out that there's 4 or 5 suppliers in the market. Just try to understand what the parameters they work to, because take lift shafts. Different lifts fit in different shafts. Build your project to accommodate all 5. It may cost you a tiny, tiny amount of extra concrete and rebar, but the buying gains that could give you is fantastic. And you're not limiting your supply at that very outset, because actually you're giving versatility to the main contractor, who ultimately is the expert you're bringing in to build.
But coming again now, we're introducing a lot of new kind of topics there under the cost management umbrella. So there's procurement, there's strategy, there's engagement, there's contract, all of that aspect. And when you say forget about cost management, focus on data management, are we purely talking about the process of cost management, like estimating, cost planning, or are you more about the greater, I suppose, body of delivery that cost managers, quantity surveyors do?
It's definitely in the wider sense. Yeah. I mean, there's certain things which we'll always have to do as cost managers. I mean, from a very simple perspective, we should be advising our clients from the outset if possible. We should be helping them establish their business cases. I would urge every client to get your professional team to help you that early. It means then you got realistic parameters of whether it works or not. But what we're trying to do here is what we're trying to do is remove the duplication of unnecessary work streams. That means ultimately you're paying less money for the product you're buying. If you're driving your data hard enough, and you should be asking each member of your team, how can I improve this? From your lead architect, your engineer, everybody on that team. you should be working from the one platform. So I don't want to use too many like BIM model, etc. You want to be driving your data in a way that everybody can interrogate it, everybody can audit it, and then everybody can have access to it and refine it. So you're in a point where discrepancies will get picked up. The wrong thing won't get ordered. You've got a very high probability, the more eyes you have on it, someone will pick it up, raise it as a query, it's closed out. You're then in a place where the information you're tendering on, the information you're designing on, you're not overpaying as you go through the process. And as then you move from stage to stage to stage, really you get buy-in. And if you have early engagement from certain team members outside your initial design team, you're going to get natural benefits, because they'll go, we can never put that product doesn't work in that scenario, that seal doesn't work around the window, that EPDM just won't go there.
Yeah,
all those
that
things.
European product doesn't work in the US.
Absolutely. Or that are actually what you kind of, as a client, you get to a place with, you might realize that I need to be a little bit more sophisticated in my procurement delivery. I need to talk to certain suppliers because I want them now to enhance their product, do something different, do a bit of R&D for me, because I'm having a recurring problem that if they can eradicate, they become my solution. And I'm trying to narrow it so the clients don't have choice. But if you act with everybody who's supplying something to you, even the contractors, they're here to build the product.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of things there I just want to dig into a little bit. Investing in R&D, getting your consultants involved as a client, getting your client involved as a consultant, that doesn't have to cost the earth, moon and stars. That can be very small, it can be very basic, but it could have a huge impact. Like an example would be standardizing certain aspects of your project. For example, cost breakdown structures. Just purely standardizing that. You could argue that's a part of R&D, research and development. It could very well be, depending on what standard that you decide to take into your organization. Of course, I'd always argue use an international standard, so you can move into the international markets and speak with international clients. But R&D doesn't have to cost the ends of the earth.
It's, even on a practical terms, I would say 99% of suppliers out there, if you engage with them and said, I have a recurring issue that there's a leak, they will work with you to try and remove that joint. So they will work with you, and then you go to a single piece pipe, at which point you've now stopped that issue. You've removed you've removed that risk entirely from your business. So it's about engaging in that way, getting your team to understand your problems, because that's what they're there to solve them, as opposed to designing in something later that costs you a problem, maintenance issue, a reoccurring cost. Can we remove it, guys?
Yeah. And then you talk about accessibility to information and data, making sure that everybody on the project is informed, making sure that we have enough transparency between teams and groups so that they do have access to that information. But I often hear I'd almost argue that these are in countries where BIM is developing, you hear about people talking about their IP, not sharing information because they're intellectual property. We can't do that because our libraries now, you will see them. And now, coming from Denmark and Scandinavia, that conversation's gone. That died out decades ago here, but it's still happening in other countries where BIM really hasn't developed. How do you come over that or overcome that as a client then, if these situations keep popping up their head above that water level, IP, who has responsibility for the information, et cetera, et cetera?
We're naturally always going to have some barrier as we move through, interfacing better with technology. We will have that barrier. And certain people will always want to not pass on their intelligence, their IP, whatever. It'll come to a point where the benefits absolutely outweigh any other disadvantage. That's coming very close. But there'll be solid evidence from a number of key clients, no doubt, very soon, that they'll only work in this way, and then people will shift. There will be a shift in that. Like, even how we work as quantity surveyors now. So traditionally, we used to go out and we'd be on site. We do our valuations. for me, that process that process is changing. So we should be looking at what other information is already being produced by the project team that we can benefit, do our job quicker, easier, and more accurate. And the best way to do that is using some of the systems the project teams are already doing. We just do a bit more front-end work. That small amount of front-end work will reduce the QS's ability and also the the cost it is to a client in carrying out a simple valuation tool, which is even more accurate because actually the information you're using is being generated by the contractor
or the design team, whatever the structure of the project really is. And that leads us very nicely into the kind of the third point of our subtopic, which is structures and standards kind of over traditional process models, right, or process structures. So data is key, we're saying, obviously, to projects now. It is the key to the future. But the lack of standards and lack of structures we have within our businesses, on our projects, within the industry at large, I'd almost argue is a hindrance to us developing quicker. So like for companies and smaller QS practices and even the graduate QSs here, what can we do when it comes to structures and standards within our organizations?
It really comes back to the information, how we're processing it. You take a project, say a number of years ago. The requirements for compliance were there, the standards were there. What was constructed may or may not, and they would have had QA. It would have been quality assurance might have been seen as an add-on. However, that requirement is fundamental now. It's a fundamental to build, because ultimately what we're doing is building. We're cost controlling, we're cost managing a compliant design. It comes down to compliance. And it's having the tools or the procedures and systems that we then can use to ensure that blue door is a blue door.
And not a red door.
And not a red door. Because not everybody has the experience to know the difference. Like we're taking a very simple example there, but not everyone has that keen eye to spot that the deflection head isn't built in compliance with the architect's drawings. Not everyone has that level of intuition that they have to be through that a few times to see it. Where it's that compliance to the architect's information and it's the transparency to be able to get access to it is fundamental for me. So the way I see, even down to the data sheet that sits behind it, for people to be able to interface with that information quickly, efficiently, that's not through volumes of different files and different servers. That has to be through the one means. And that's building information modeling. It's just not we're not just talking about lines on a drawing. We're not talking a geometry. We're talking about intel that is attached to components, whether that be the life of the component, whether that be the replacement cycle, how that relates to the cost. Real 5D information coming out of these models. So for people to be able to almost autonomously take the quants out of a model, use that quickly and say, actually the floor slabs are out, or the walls are out, or is there 520 windows in this? No, there's not, there's 300. It's to be able to quickly do sanity checks. So as consultants and us being able to add value, we are redirecting the super tanker as quickly as it can be. And for me, that data management, as in that having the intel at your fingers and in a usable form, whatever that might be, whether it's quality assurance, project photographs, program information, all that is assimilated back into something that key decision makers are getting a very honest, truthful picture about where their project's at.
Yeah, we talked a little bit the other day about claims management and how there's probably a revolution happening within the traditional process of claims management. I know we're, don't focus on cost management, focus on data management, cost management, claims management, quantity surveyors heavily involved in both aspects of that, I would say. But the key part of any successful claim is the information that you have to support that claim.
And equally, the defense for that claim. Some may see the collation of information as as a boring task. I would say it's absolutely fundamental. As simple as taking the photograph in the same position week on week on week. That to me is gold.
Now, all of that can be automated, of course. We're not talking about a person
absolutely.
standing in the corner of the room.
It can be as simple as
week.
the camera on the tower crane. So it's not that you're asking someone to go out and do something. It can be a simple process that you've automated. And by automated, I mean attaching a camera, whatever it could be. But you even down to, is your consultant team being diligent in the meetings they're having? Are they being accurate in the minutes they're keeping? Are they using the correct documents? Is there access to the contract? I don't know how many projects I've worked on over the years. The contract, the physical contracts are locked away. And on 2 occasions, they were working to the wrong information. Like that was quite a while back. But it was because somebody decided we need to lock that away. That's crazy. So you're in a place where it's that transparency that leads the whole team to a successful place.
And that's great, because talking about locking that contract away, quantity surveyors and cost managers, our discipline in the industry is really challenged at the moment in terms of transparency, because people are looking at cost information as being highly confidential. Now, I argue that cost information shouldn't be confidential. Yes, total budget frame, etc., maybe before you procure. But nevertheless, when a project is finished, and you talk about data management here, when a project is finished, especially on our public projects, all of that information should be released. Not necessarily released in the traditional sense of we can apply for access to that information through government forms, etc. More importantly, like cost databases, where it's a collection of this information in order to drive value in future projects. We talk a lot about closing the circle of the linear process of projects from start to finish, but now it's the circular process of start to finish, feeding into the start of the next project, etc. So I think the industry, I guess, that needs to change slightly. The mindset of confidentiality needs to change, because really does it make a difference? Hypothetically, let's hypothetically say everybody knew what the budget for the project was. And that happens quite a lot in competitions and etc. Let's just say we knew what the budget for the tender for the project was. We go to tender to the supply chain. If we're operating in a granular level of bill of quantities, cost breakdown structures, does it really matter? We can always challenge the unit prices. If they come in on budget, does it really matter?
It's a difficult one, because different clients will have different perspectives on confidentiality. Certain people I've worked with would be very conscious of not letting anybody know that number. That would scare them.
Can I ask why? Just in a general sense, why does that scare people?
Certain people might think that you need to be the lowest price. And if you're then setting a budget, and they know the budget, they're never going to give you the lowest price. They're going to give you something like the budget.
So if we move away from cost management and focused on data management.
Now you're talking about supply chain. Now you're talking about what does the product do? So now you're really focusing on I want a shower. Brilliant. What type of shower? Well, actually, I don't need it to be chrome. I'm happy with this product. This lasts longer in the environment I'm putting it in. Now you can challenge the cost. Now you're not talking money anymore, but actually you're getting a better deal. You will 10 times out of 10 you will end up with the right product, because ultimately you can't, if you can't afford it, then you need to look at what you can afford, or what the function of it is, which is ultimately what comes back to when you really drive at the spec.
So what we're missing at the moment within our industry really is that transparency around costs, the transparency around data, so that we're able to collect that information so that we can challenge in the future. It's the principle around setting robust budgets based on data, so that we're confident in the budget from day one, that we move towards in data management into when we are activating the supply chain and engaging with the supply chain. So we're not cost management anymore, we're data managers.
So for some of our clients, we maintain their cost databases. So let's talk specifically of a client and their cost databases. So really what we're trying to do is inform them through their own data of the outturn cost. So for me, the tender cost is one thing. Some projects, if you put the effort in up front, you're either really clear on your design, you're really clear on your brief, which is super. You carry it to a stage D, it's 85% designed, brilliant, and you've got a contractor who's willing to take that, finish off the last bit, you'll normally 9 times out of 10 come out broadly at that cost unless you change something.
And I would argue, as long as the contractor's price is robust enough for the contractor to deliver and allow them to make their margin.
So my little example is based on an intelligent process involving people early, understanding the products you're talking about, and then having a degree of competition that you're not limiting the supply chain. So then you're in a place where that outturn cost. We are then informing their new projects which are coming online. So when someone says, "Oh, we always build it for £10,
X whatever per square meter or whatever it is," yeah.
You're in a place where you go, hold on a second. You're absolutely right with what you said. However, it wasn't. It was €25. It was because, do you remember those 4 things that you absolutely needed? Oh yeah. Because remember the operations team came back just twice and told us? So it's realigning some of those, using cost data and using the data that we're having from the whole project, feeding that back in.
And this is hugely powerful stuff for repeat investor, repeat client, especially if their product type is the same. So multi-residential, social housing, data centers, manufacturing, if it is multi-manufacturing around the globe.
Almost every sector. You can do every sector.
In logistics.
Yeah.
No,
the one thing I would say to you is there's always going to be a change. So if you build in year 1 and you go, your next project is year 5, there could be an advancement in tech. There could be the product might go offline. But I'm never advocating that just because you bought it for £10 in year 1, it'll be now £9 in year 5. What I'm saying is you might have to change how you spend your money because the regulations might have required, the building regs might have changed. You'll have a number of things to take in to realign to really what you come back to is what's the purpose of the building I'm building, or what's the function it serves, and how can I drive at that Mr. Design or Mr. and Mrs. Design team. The key thing there is we should be challenging the fundamentals of the project and its requirements.
Yeah. So we're moving away from cost management, where you could argue cost management is just numbers. Construction management, commercial management is a little bit wider, but it's really, we're focusing on data and the information available to us.
But if you look at the intelligence that surrounds that, if you look at the intelligence that surrounds how we put together our historical information, how we're challenging the current budgets, it's that ability to interrogate the price point, whether it's in a range or whether it's in some type of interactive cost model. It's that basis and that information that's helping us, rather than us spending hours measuring or doing other tasks, which really we're now looking at supply chain. We're looking at, well, which type of product are we going for again? That's really, I think, where we should be focusing. But also we should be looking at the buying gains we can get for clients. We should be looking at,
repeat products.
Can I get a better warranty? I can't get you £1 off, but I can get you 2 more years in the warranty. Absolutely fantastic. And it's not you're negotiating, that's what's being offered by the supply chain member, which doesn't really cost them, because if they believe in their product and they know it can last longer, so you buy a watch, you know it's going to last.
There's value
5
there.
years.
You've just created value.
You've just
for the
created
client.
your life cycle now for you can remove. Good news, your running costs have just reduced by 50p.
Supply chain discussions, we've talked a little bit about that today, and the other podcasts as well, the other series. But in terms of structuring the data then and the standardization of that data, when it comes to forgetting cost management and focus on data management, like even your budget structures, your bills of quantities, your CBSs, how you structure the information coming back from the supply chain, what does that look like? Are we standardizing that across all our portfolios? Are we standardizing across the entire business?
Well, we're certainly trying to. I think the key thing, and we have a number of examples that we're running with at the moment, it's having a uniform structure that is adaptable to each client's needs. So it might be they want it in a different coding system, at which point your baseline data is malleable enough that it can migrate with a push of a button. Like that's what we operate at the moment. So it's that baseline data that we're able to it's malleable enough that you can use it.
Yeah, so structure has been able to map your baseline data so that your output can be to your clients' needs is super important. Also for your clients, though, it's good to advise them on the importance of structuring their data and their processes. So if you are a repeat developer, standardizing your contract forms, standardizing your procurement strategy that best suits you as a business, standardizing your internal economies, how you structure your reporting both upstream and downstream, all becomes important, because once you begin to structure and collect that data and information, you can then begin to overlay projects within a portfolio, understand the cost drivers. And I'm just talking cost drivers. You can overlay the information, understand supply chain. Who's supplying what, when, why, where?
Like for me, it's all about risk management. You're really bringing it back to how are you interface? Which client is carrying? Actually, do you realize all your lifts are being bought with this one individual? All your windows are being bought over here. They are already committed elsewhere, because we have visibility of that with some of our clients. We can see what certain people are doing, but it's about being close enough to the supply chain to actually see if how we can assist them with that risk. I suppose going back to, we need to spend more time on the content, because the form will change. Yeah. But we absolutely do need a universal form. As QSs, and the RICS are massive advocates of that, we need to have a universal form to drive at consistency, both for everybody.
And I think, it becomes an important part of this transition to data managers then, because if we just even today in a rudimentary base, if we standardize and structure our data, even if we only collect it in Excel, it's going to have huge benefits for us in the future as cost managers, because once the platforms and softwares and the developers, bring out new platforms for us, or we'll be able to use that information because it's structured and standardized much more effectively and quickly than we would if it wasn't. If it's unstructured, it becomes very difficult, almost manual, to structure that information, and that's a huge task.
I couldn't see any business operating in that manual capacity. I don't think you'd get any efficiency. It would be costing you money to work in that way. Like what we're doing for some of our clients now, they need to be able to see the information in the way that they can understand it, and they can drill into it, because they might realize they might realize something that actually I'm spending 20% of my budget here, and that's gotten, like, yes, they might need some of it, but they don't need all of it. And then they're kind of going, hold on a second, we need to can we look at this, please? Can we look at that? Because I get no value out of that. You might tell me I need it for my business, but I get absolutely no value. So it's something then that's either slightly reduced, modified, and that could be a substantial saving that we wouldn't see, but our clients could.
So moving away from the traditional models of sitting down at a project and, okay, what's our cost structure? Or have anybody got a form there for our budget structure? What's our structure for our BOQ today on this project? That all needs to be, that question should never be asked. It should be part of the project delivery manual, the commercial management strategy, project delivery manual, whatever you call it at the beginning of the project. This is how we're doing it. This is what we're doing. This is when we're doing it.
So take a real life example. So we're in a place where we automate the quants, etc., coming out of
whatever's available. Yeah,
absolutely. So let's assume for a minute that we've fully interfaced with the BIM execution plan. People have abided by the governing rules that allow 5D to occur. So now we're in a place where we're able to extract that information momentarily. What we're then not focusing on is, because we've gone through the checks. Let's assume for a second the checks are being done. We're then focusing on the rates. We're challenging the rates in that geography. And we're looking at the supply chain partners, whether that's with a contractor, with another. That's real value. You do an update, the entire thing is completely automated then. You now are really focusing on the granularity of the data, and the accuracy. So now you're saying, actually, we've changed the fixing on that. We've completely said we're going to change the cladding. We're going to do something different. You're at a point now where you're actually talking about the meaningful stuff. You're now interfacing with the program. You're getting people to think about build sequence, program, actually
procurement strategy.
Who's responsible for it? What if now you're really kind of getting into what will matter to clients is that ultimately they're building, the component we're building is going to be better. It'll be more compliant. They can then dispose of that asset with clear transparency. You now have got all the documentation in, call it a form, which is fully searchable, fully electronic, fully accessible instantly. Keyword searches. So really you're in a place where you're able to bring the intelligence of the build, put it into a forum that then that asset can instantly be disposed of following, and let's say, whatever the disposal strategy might be, the due diligence that's required, into a form that someone could come in and audit that in days with all certification there. That's gold to anybody who's looking at, either recirculating assets.
Yeah, or selling. Yeah, exactly.
For me, that's where we're all going. The whole industry has to go there. Because if we think we're stuck in the place where we're going to have, I'm sure I've got that piece of paper somewhere.
Yeah,
Give me a minute. I'll be back to you.
That's gone.
That's gone.
Yeah.
And what it does is it gives everybody in the team the ability to move off that project. Ideally, you would have a lessons learned session, and that would be fed back to that client team on the next project, because it won't be the same people. I'd be very lucky if you are. But that whole recirculation of knowledge is fundamental.
And I think that's leading very nicely into the kind of final subtopic is what's the value. And there's a couple of points you mentioned there, that reduced effort in certain tasks that don't really create a lot of value means you have more time and headspace to concentrate on more value creation, risk management, change management, communication with the client, analytics, looking at the information, trying to dig into that. And that's where standardization and structure really comes into its own. Because if you standardize and structure how you're going to manage the information, how you're going to manage the communication, it means you don't have to sit down and discuss at any moment in time what you're doing. It's already there, done and structured. What you're doing then is concentrating on the project. How do we do it? Like in terms of, again, procurement strategy, if it's analytics across jurisdictions, et cetera, et cetera.
The piece I'd add in there is, it's key to have the structure and the system, but the structure and the system needs to be malleable enough that it can be used in multiple different ways. And then you're using that information multiple times. So people aren't recreating. They validate, they move on. They validate. They're not recreating.
Again, like your quantities, right? So if you're using the quantities from the model and you validated the quality of those quantities, it means you can reuse and reuse and reuse without the same level of effort that is taken if you were to manually measure in, concept design, you re-manually measure in schematic, you re-manually measure again in detailed design, next claims that come in, you're re-manually measuring, manual measure. It's taking you the same time each time to do it.
Even on your program. So take, for instance, you use your quality assurance, it's a brilliant tool. Everyone professes they do it like absolutely, it's bread and butter stuff, we do it. But now you automate that to give you what would be within a percent or two accuracy on your program. You now are taking a vast amount of information which are verified by multiple team members who you trust and employ and pay. Ultimately, the client is paying the contractor, the supply chain. You are paying these people to do a job for you. The good news is their job can be used for multiple things, but unless you have a system that allows you to drive that data in the right way, you're now paying somebody else. You're actually not paying, you're paying multiple people to come in after you've already paid two others to do it. I mean, with my money, I wouldn't do it.
No, because it takes time, and as you say, it takes money, and time is money as well, right? So if you can be more efficient in the pre-construction, in how you create this information that allows you to procure, that allows a contractor to use that information in an efficient way, it has a time impact for the contractor as well, a positive one. That all comes back to the client at the end of the day. And really, I guess this is what we're talking about when it comes to, forget about cost management, focus on data management. Cost is an output of the data anyway.
Cost is output. You're also looking at what's the key for the client. It's the operation of their asset. It's the operation of the asset class. And the people who know most about that is the operations team. And I would spend at the outset enough time, whether it's a mock-up, whether it's something that allows them to visualize, to understand what we're doing, so that we then get to a point where the people who ultimately are driving the business, the client's business, are happy. If we do that, we succeed. And we've got an asset that aligns with the obligations or life cycle requirements, so then that the client isn't spending even more money earlier to replace an asset. Wouldn't that be a fantastic place to be as a client?
I think a repeat message for us over and over in this podcast is challenging what we're doing on a daily basis, the tasks that we do as a QS and a cost manager, whether we're a graduate, a mid, a junior, a mid, a senior, or commercial, it doesn't matter. Constantly challenging, can we improve what we're doing?
If someone says to you, I've been doing it for 20 years, that should be immediately a red flag to go, hold on a second. Why are we doing the way we are? Does it make sense? And is it adding anything to the project apart from, I'm just doing what this guy says?
So very interesting. So forget about cost management, focus on data management.
It's a new currency.
Sean,
really
John,
is.
it was a pleasure again, man. I know. So for anybody listening, this name needs to stick. So you can write to Sean on LinkedIn, covered under Sean, John, it's all good, right? Apparently, Ilya is going to come back and join us for our next podcast, but I'm unsure.
Was it something I said?
I think it was a text message you read there out in the last one, to be honest. But
I like that.
But
Okay.
let's see. Let's see. We're unsure yet. We're
Okay.
unsure. We have to put out the feelers, Thanks very much for listening. There's a LinkedIn link below in the show notes. We would love to connect with you.
We hope you enjoyed it and have you with us in the next one. Thank you very much.